Right, for more on the country's infrastructural outlook for this year, 2024, we are now being joined by the Chief Executive Officer, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Dr. Yusuf, thank you for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you very much, Ayo. My pleasure.
All right, so we're looking at infrastructure development. Can you briefly give us the current state of Nigeria's infrastructure development, briefly?
Well, the current state is a state of very high infrastructure deficit. And that has been having very serious adverse effects on productivity in the economy, on the cost of businesses, cost of operations, cost of production. And this is also affecting the general price level, in the economy. And if you look at the different infrastructure classes, basically we have two classes of infrastructure. You have the economic infrastructure, you have the social infrastructure. So if you look at the critical segments of economic infrastructure, particularly power, transportation, and if you break down transportation, you'll be looking at roads, looking at railway system, looking at airports, the ports, and so on. And of course, you also have ICT infrastructure. Of all these categories of infrastructure, I think the most challenging for now, that is impacting very seriously on the economy, are the power and energy situation and the transportation situation. So those are the most critical, and the deficit is huge. Because by the current estimates in the infrastructure master plan, we are supposed to be spending $150 billion annually, for the next 23 years to be able to bridge this gap. And when you relate that amount to the amount of budget we have, you can see a very huge gap. And for some of the multilateral institutions, they have also estimated that for a developing economy, you should be spending at least between 7 to 10% of your GDP to be able to ramp up your infrastructure to support your growth and development aspirations. We are very far from that. Because if you look at 10% of our GDP now, we're talking about 20 trillion naira. I mean, look at the budget that we have seen. Even if you take all the budgets together, both the federal and subnationals, we are not anywhere near that. So we have a very huge deficit, to deal with.
All right, so let's look at the budgetary allocation, Dr. Yusuf, for infrastructure, which stands at 1.32 trillion naira. What key physical infrastructure do you think the President Bola Tinubu administration have to concentrate on, or must concentrate on, to unlock our economic potential as a country?
Well, the most critical for now is power and roads. The power sector, partially, because there's a lot of private sector presence in the power sector. You have the private sector footprint in the generating segment of power, in the distribution, then the transmission is in the hands of government. But government has a lot of role to play to ensure adequate power supply. But in the area of roads is so critical. First, we have very minimal private sector presence, if at all, in road infrastructure. Secondly, almost 100% of the movement of goods and the movement of people in the country is by road. So road is at the center, at the heart of logistics in this economy.
Oh, we're really running out of time, Dr. Yusuf, but I just want to find out, lastly, what funding options do you think the current administration should explore, to bridge the country's infrastructure deficit?
Well, within the budget, I think we need to, prioritize a lot more infrastructure. The good thing about the current budget is that at least we are seeing a higher allocation to capital than the current. That's a very good signal. Then we need to also create the framework to incentivize more private sector involvement. A very credible, regulatory framework, legal framework. We need to create incentives, fiscal incentives, monetary policy incentives, and a proper framework for the sharing of risks so that you can incentivize a lot more private investment in infrastructure. Because the government cannot do it alone, certainly.
Oh, definitely do that, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Thank you for your thoughts on the News at 10.
Thank you very much.